Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We are officially becoming historical detectives. We're going to journey all the way back to the dawn of a major world tradition to explore the lost codices of Islam. By digging into hidden pages, looking at some wild physical evidence, and bringing in some cutting-edge science, we're going to reconstruct an absolutely fascinating textual mystery. But before we get into the weeds, I want you to just stop and think about something for a second. What actually happens when history's earliest pages just go missing? Think about the sheer gravity of that. We totally rely on written records to understand our collective human story, right? So what happens when the very first physical drafts of a completely monumental historical tradition are scattered or erased or just lost to time? Well, it leaves a gap, a silent, empty space where historians, linguists, and archaeologists basically have to hunt down incredibly rare, incredibly fragile clues just to piece together the truth. Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1. The mystery of early texts. To really grasp this mystery, we first need to understand the unique historical era we're looking at. This was a time when a massive tradition was literally transitioning from human memory into a physical form. And to do that, we gotta get our terminology straight. So a codex. A codex is simply an ancient manuscript text in book form. This was actually a massive technological leap from the continuous scroll. Think about it. With distinct pages bound together, a reader could suddenly flip back and forth, cross-reference things, and organize information in entirely new ways. It was a real game changer. Now, in the very earliest days of Islam, the tradition was primarily oral. It was recited and passed down with just incredible care from person to person. So the core historical challenge we're exploring today is that exact transition point, the incredibly difficult process of taking a fluid, living oral tradition and locking it into a permanent, standardized written form. I mean, just imagine the sheer logistics of this for a second. You are trying to capture the spoken word of an entire emerging civilization, and you have to put it onto incredibly expensive, highly limited physical materials. All right, moving right along. Section 2, Unearthing the Lost Codices. Let's move to the timeline and see exactly how this builds. What does the timeline of these hidden pages actually look like? Well, we start in the early 7th century, which, as we just talked about, is a period entirely dominated by oral transmission. Then, right in the mid-7th century, we see the Uthmanic standardization. This was a massive, highly coordinated historical effort to unify the text into a single authoritative version. Now, for literal centuries, those pre-standardized physical drafts, people thought they were just lost forever. But then, fast forward to 1972, and this stunning cache of ancient manuscripts was discovered in Sana'a, Yemen. This incredible find finally opened the door for modern carbon dating to test these lost pages. And let me tell you, modern technology is absolutely the ultimate historical detective tool. When researchers applied carbon dating to the parchment from these early discoveries, the scientific data gave us a stunning result. If you look closely at the data, there's a 95% probability placing the origins of this parchment squarely between 568 and 645 CE. So what does that actually mean? It means this scientific evidence verifies, without a doubt, that we are looking at materials from the very earliest decades of the Islamic historical record. But here's the catch. Despite all the power of modern technology, the actual pool of evidence we have is astoundingly small. 20 plus. That's it. Out of an entire early empire, we are often working with just over 24 fragile, damaged, incredibly precious pieces of parchment from some of these fragment discoveries. It is literally a needle in a haystack. Every single surviving page is a completely priceless window into the past. Which brings us to Section 3, Comparing the Ancient Manuscripts. Now, with such rare physical evidence in hand, researchers are obviously meticulously analyzing every single stroke of ink. Now, what's really interesting about this is the concept of a palimpsest. Okay, so in the ancient world, parchment was made from animal skins, right? Which meant it was insanely expensive to produce. So if a text was deemed outdated or unneeded, scribes wouldn't just throw it in the trash. They literally washed or scraped the ink off and reused the page. The lower text is that erased original, older script, and the upper text is the newer script written right over it. Today, using some really cool special imaging, scientists can actually read the ghost letters of those drafts that were wiped away centuries ago. And when paleographers examine that hidden lower text, they find some fascinating things. We're basically comparing the highly standardized structure that ultimately became the norm against the non-standardized variations found in those erased layers. For example, we see differences in the order of the chapters, which are known as surahs, and variations in the early Hijazi script markings. Now, it's absolutely crucial to note here that as we observe these paleographic differences, we're looking at this strictly as an educational observation of historical textual evolution. We're focusing purely on the mechanics of how early writing systems developed over time. So what exactly are they looking for? Well, the physical clues paleographers use to identify and date these codices are incredibly specific. First, they look for early Hijazi script, which is a very, very early form of Arabic calligraphy. Second, they note the lack of diacritical dots. You know those small marks that differentiate consonants in later Arabic? They are largely missing here. Third, they examine varying styles of verse separators. And finally, they look at different ink compositions. These physical characteristics are literally the fingerprints that tell us exactly when and how a manuscript was produced. And all of this data leads to a pretty profound conclusion for historians. As this insight captures perfectly, the discovery of these fragments provides an unprecedented window into the fluid landscape of early textual transmission before ultimate standardization. This isn't just about spotting ancient typos, right? Historians view these variations as absolutely crucial evidence of a vibrant, living, evolving historical process, a time where the written word was literally still catching up to the spoken word. And the geographical footprint of this evidence spans way beyond just a single room. The famous Sana'a Palimpsest, which was found in Yemen and dates to the mid-7th century, is just one piece of this giant puzzle, notable for those lower text variations we just discussed. These clues were scattered all over and independently uncovered across different regions over decades, and every single discovery adds a unique, completely vital viewpoint to our understanding of the early manuscript tradition. So the crucial point is coming up here in Section 4, the historical significance. So why does analyzing erased ink and undotted letters on some ancient pieces of parchment actually matter to us today? Well, because it represents this beautiful intersection of high-tech science and deep human history. The modern paleographer's process starts with the physical unearthing of these super fragile fragments. Next comes multispectral imaging, which is literally shooting different wavelengths of light at the page to make invisible erased ink glow. Then comes rigorous linguistic comparison, and finally, historical contextualization. It is just a massive, completely collaborative effort to resurrect lost history. The preservation of these texts matters so much because ancient codices are way more than just old books. They are the fragile yet remarkably enduring memory of human civilization itself. Think about it. When a scribe scraped away ink in the 7th century, they had absolutely no idea that a scientist in the 21st century would use ultraviolet light to read it all over again. It's mind-blowing. These manuscripts are a true testament to our profound, relentless human drive to record, to remember, and to ultimately understand our place in the world. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to really chew on. How does the survival of these incredibly fragile fragments reshape our understanding of history and the written word itself? Every single time we uncover a lost codex, it reminds us that history is never, ever fully settled. It's a living landscape just waiting to be explored. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the evidence today.